Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I watched The Gloves Are Off, Anthony Joshua, Charles Martin, or, since the champion deserves top billing in any matchup with the challenger, we'll say Charles Martin, Anthony Joshua. Right? Guys are sitting across from each other. Johnny Nelson is in the room. Let's just say that Charles Martin is a guy who stays in character, right? He wants you to view him as a tough guy who came up the hard way, right? He's not trying to fit into, polite society, right? Whereas Anthony Joshua is trying to come across as polished and is trying to look like, he is conscious of image and fans. Charles Martin is taking a different approach where he's trying to look tough and trying to say, hey, look, I'm from the streets. I didn't have a daddy. Nobody's given me a chance in my life. I'm not expecting anything from anyone. No one owes me anything. I'm the champ, and I'm going to win this fight. Right? Now, it was interesting because the guys don't really talk about fight styles. They don't, critique each other in terms of saying, hey, you look weak against John Public in that fight. Hey, you got exposed. I didn't see the stamina, right? There are no comments like that. This is just, a steer down where the guys are looking tough and stuff like that. And, Charles Martin's whole thing is, look, I'm a tough guy. Joshua's whole thing is everyone says they're a tough guy before they fight me, right? But I did think there was an interesting moment that kind of dovetails well with history. Charles Martin at one point says the line, I walk this earth as a god, right? Now, there was a matchup years earlier between two unbeaten heavyweights, right? Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, the first time they fought, Madison Square Garden, one of the biggest moments in boxing history. And there's a moment, it's actually captured on thefightcity.com, where Ali is throwing a combination at Joe Frazier. And Ali says, don't you know I'm God? And Joe Frazier survives the combination and comes back with, well, God's going to get his ass whooped tonight. Right? Folks, unless you believe that these accomplished boxers, guys who have been in fights in front of crowds their entire career, unless you feel that they're going to get caught up in some personal dynamic, the way I see it is it really comes down to skills, right? It really comes down to what the guy's actually doing in the ring. Now, Charles Martin says an interesting line. They asked him if the fight's going to go the distance. He says no. He says there's no reason why a fight should go the distance when you have two big men in the ring. Now, to that, let me just say, is Charles Martin aware of Vladimir Klitschko's height? Is he aware of Tyson Fury's height? Those men just went 12 rounds, right? Nobody hit the canvas in that fight. The Ali Frazier fight, the one I'm talking about earlier here, that went 15 rounds. Ali gets decked, gets off the canvas, goes the distance, right? Let's just say guys with big punches have fought each other for a long time at heavyweight, and fights have gone the distance. I also understand, too, that when the camera's rolling and you're sitting across from your opponent and stuff like that, you're trying to sell tickets, you're going to say colorful lines and stuff like that. I myself don't expect this fight to go the distance because I don't think either guy here has skills on par with Vladimir Klitschko or Tyson Fury, right? In other words, I'm not going to, expect to see a lot of jabs and movement and guys dancing around. Look at Tyson Fury move around the ring against Vladimir Klitschko. I believe he moves more against Klitschko than either guy is going to move here. Right? But all I can say is this. I like these shows for the theater But if you're looking for a gambling edge, I didn't really see one in this telecast. I just saw two guys trying to look tough. Let me say too, I personally believe that when guys get tested in the ring, right, it's when guys have to get off the canvas, or guys have fights like the Mayweather-Castillo fight, where a huge portion of the public, including, right, some of the people involved in that telecast, thought Floyd Mayweather lost that fight. It's when guys have car crashes or near car crashes that I believe fighters get insight and the kind of humility that neither of these guys have, right? These guys are both unbeaten fighters. If you line up all of the people they fought, let's just say the top guys they fought wouldn't be household names. The Glasgow fight, by which Charles Martin won the title, you know what? Glasgow's knee blew up on him, right? That's the worst fight Glasgow, I'm sure, has ever had. You didn't have the Glasgow who fought Malik Scott. You just didn't, right? Anthony Joshua, who's the best guy he's fought? He just fought Dillian Whyte. That was a step up in class for Anthony Joshua. But let's be real, Dillian Whyte was out of the ring for a little bit, right? Dillian Whyte might train with Klitschko's crowd, but Dillian Whyte himself doesn't have a lot of victories over elite heavyweights. So as I was looking at these guys, I saw two guys who, unbeaten records aside, are relatively untested, right? Kevin Johnson, I would say, is probably the most accomplished person that Anthony Joshua has fought, right? But, Kevin Johnson's a little bit older these days, right? Johnson didn't really test Joshua. Joshua basically walks him down and bulldozes him. There's no moment in that fight where you're looking at Johnson put up a real stiff resistance that Joshua has to think through. So for me, I have a great time watching these, the gloves are off, when it features fighters who have had career-defining fights, right? A Carl Froch or somebody sitting there remembering wars, right? Talking smack with context, able to say, hey, you didn't look so good against that guy, right? A guy who could say, look, the fighter you fought, a few years ago is a different fighter today. I've learned some things, right? By contrast here, and I don't care about the ages here, you had two young pups who couldn't even say things like, hey, you remember when I fought David Haye? You remember when I fought Derek Chisora? You remember when I fought Bermain Stavern? You remember when I fought Chris Arreola? You remember when I fought Eric Molina? Right? You remember when I fought Andy Ruiz, Lucas Brown? Right? No, you didn't have that. You had two guys who had fought next to no one trying to look tough, talking about not having a father. Right? Okay, fair enough. I'm sure both of these guys come from tough backgrounds, etc. I'm sure both of these guys had lives before boxing. That's fine. Let's hope in the ring they give us the kind of effort that we got from the Ali Fraser trilogy, right? I don't expect this fight to last that long, right? Because I feel both of these guys are flat-footed. Both of these guys are seek and destroy type guys, right? Charles Martin, as I've said, I've looked at films where he's missing punches by this much, right? Anthony Joshua should be able to have countering opportunities, right? I didn't buy Anthony Joshua's line about the fact that Charles Martin is a southpaw is not a big deal. If Anthony Joshua can't handle Charles Martin's southpaw stance, then he's going to be in big trouble early, and both fighters are going to know it, right? So, get to this fight early. You don't want to be grabbing popcorn or beer or using the bathroom, stepping in front of your TV somewhere in the middle of the second round to see one guy already being counted out. I don't expect this fight to go the distance betting-wise, as I've said in an earlier video, because I'm expecting a shootout. I believe the overwhelming underdog, Charles Martin, is the value play, hedged with Joshua by KO. Right? You're getting so much, odds-wise, on Charles Martin. Why even take Martin by KO? Just take Martin to win the fight. The casino's already compensating you, and hedge to play with Joshua by KO. Because it's a heavyweight title fight, folks, it's scheduled for 12 rounds. I don't believe we've seen Joshua finish the 8th round in a fight. Right? So, I am expecting a stoppage. I don't feel I learned much, other than that these two guys won't look tough, and that these two guys are big heavyweights. I don't think I learned much from the Gloves Are Off TV show. Right? Those shows are best when you're looking at guys like Miguel Cotto, who's actually had several fights and can actually talk about fighting several guys. When Anthony Joshua says, hey, I fought other tough guys, you're scratching your head saying, oh, maybe the guys were tough, but, as I'm looking at a list of heavyweight contenders, let's just say a lot of the guys aren't on that list. Right? Just food for thought. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. What are your thoughts on the fight? What are your thoughts on the program? I hope you leave those thoughts in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.